right, I'm here to read chapter 17 of Pagoo, and it's called A Fright, a Frolic, and a Farewell. And should be on page 13 of your packet, okay? And the questions, I think, would start at number 2, which is why did the snails go crazy? Number 3, why is the rain so harmful? And what happens to Pagoo during the storm? And how did the low hermits manage to get Pagoo out of his shell? And I have a picture here on the screen that is a tide pool that I really love. I think that it's a neat picture showing a bunch of sea stars and anemones, and the tide's out. Okay, so chapter 17, rain spurted over the rocks and foamed across the tide pool, and a fresh water layer was riding on the top now of this salty tide pool town. So you can imagine here just a big rainstorm, and now all this fresh water is all right in this area. Okay. Pagoo's shell was being tossed from the ledge of the waterfall. It bounced and skipped for an instant on the hissing layer of rain. When fresh and salt waters mingled, Pagoo lost speed and sank to the bottom. At first, there was a blankness of muddied water, and then Pagoo saw nightmares of frightened creatures rushing seaward, dim shapes of crabs, fish, shrimps, worms, lobsters. Swimmers and crawlers by the thousands were on the move to deeper places. They knew by instinct that salted water could kill them. Now, this poisonous freshness was raining down. Even Pagurus would have to hurry. At a low part of Tide Pool Town, tired Pagoo dragged his shell down the canyon. As the canyon deepened, fresh water grew weaker. Except for being elbowed by crowds on the sides of him, Pagoo felt safer here. But help for the overcrowding was at hand. Every 12 hours, rain or shine, the tide rolls in, and here it came. Strong, new brine crept onward, making the deep places deeper and much more roomy. It salted the rainwater in time to save those being not already dead. Night came, and the rain was less violent, but a steady sea wind blew even harder. Pagoo and his neighbors felt their world shudder as billows surged over the canyons. Driftwood logs from the northern beaches, timbers from long-wrecked ships hurtled shoreward like battling rams with ropes of kelp lashing about in the undertow. The undertow grew strong as huge rollers crashed on the cliffs, rushing to the sea again. Each flattened wave slid back under the next one, its tons of wild water ripping at the sea bottom as it ran. This powerful undertow tugged anything loose. It churned sand and pebbles into jungled stones larger than baseballs. It hoisted bowling ball sizes for new waves to bat at. Even barnacled boulders as big as bus wheels were being lifted and heaved at the cliffs. Undertow sucked gravel from beneath tall rocks, and waves pushed them over. Tide pool scenery, which had stood for years, had shifted and changed. So all these creatures here that are just sitting so nice and calm, are getting now battered and slammed by huge waves and this undertow. Time and time again this night, Pagoo came near his death. Old Pal had yelled, "Sit tight," and Pagoo, well, he sat tight. A log smashed into the canyon wall, starting a rock slide that buried 1,000,000 beings. Pagoo crawled out of the gritty mess, only to be tumbled and rolled by the kelp snaking past. A load of gravel streaked by like buckshot, yet all of it missed Pagoo. His shell was buried in the mud, washed up, buried in sand, dragged out, and then slid under a boulder. Pagoo edged further under when a wave tilted the rock. When it teetered back, crunch! His shell was cracked like a nut, yet it held together. Pagoo was unharmed, but this wobbly boulder could no longer be trusted. He wiggled his shell out. He found a sheltered place between a crab and a lobster, huddled there, and he waited for this wild night to be over. The night ended, as all nights do, and the rain stopped. The storm blew itself out by sunup, but waves ran high and stones still rolled in the undertow. Food smells drifted everywhere. Pagoo left the crab and lobster, hustled up the canyon, and hiked back into Tide Pool Town. He marched among the countless refugees returning. With speedy spurts and sideways skitters, they dodged the rolling stones. Those creatures still alive began feasting on those who were not alive, as in the ancient custom of the sea. Pagoo had just finished a plate of clam when the undertow swirled him up, and a wave caught him and rushed him to the shore. The wave carried him far up on the beach and slammed him down on a rock. Noisy gulls flapped and feasted all around. I like this picture here that they took of these are eagles, but they're waiting, praying, looking, because when the tide goes out, they sit and wait for all the creatures that they can come and eat. Anyway, Tide Pool Town. The wave had carried him far up the beach, slammed him into the rock. Noisy gulls flapped and feasted all around him. So this was no place for Pagoo. Besides, his landing had shattered his crack shell. Now, like clothes being shred by a boy in a race to go swimming, Pagoo's covering dropped away from him piece by piece. Only one small cup clung to his tail as he high-stepped down the retreating wave into Tide Pool Town, and even that little piece fell off. Bear Pagoo was badly in need of a home again. After a storm is the very best time to look for seashells, and now a salmon brown wavy top shell caught his eye. Knobs, like pearls, bumped its crinkled surface. He liked it so well that he prodded it only a little, and then he backed right in. He curled his rear end around in that shell's inner column. Oh, everything just seemed perfect. It would have been wiser, though, to make a longer inspection. But Pagoo was anxious to be on his way. This glittering mansion made him feel oh so important. He had grown beyond the boy hermit stage. He was now big and strong, and he certainly felt like celebrating this fine day. He elbowed into a picnic here. He sampled a banquet of dainties here, and all day long he just swaggered through Tide Pool Town. And so, toward evening, he wandered back to the old hermit gang. He was fairly bursting to try out his newfound strength. Quick-witted sparring was going friendly enough until some low hermit found a hole. Right there in the rear of Pagoo's handsome new mansion. And that vulgar fellow, he just stuck his pointed toe and he poked. Pagoo swooshed from that shell as another hermit had done after young Pagoo had pinched him. Yet instead of sulking, Pagoo turned and he charged at the gang. Surprised at the sudden fury, each hermit ducked inside and slammed his doors. This big boy meant business. This fellow was really on a tear. First one, then the other of the gang felt his house shift and bang down hard and roll around like a bowling ball and crash against its neighbors. Why, this lad had become a raging billow, a mangling menace. He was now the terror of Tide Pool Town. It could not last. Pagoo, he grew tired. Eyes began to peer out. Huts and shanties flipped upright. Then it was as though someone had yelled, "Look, boys! After all, it's only Pagoo, and he's undressed too. Let's get him!" Pagoo braced himself. He could face those charging from the front, but the thuds of the shell gang Well, they came from behind him, and it simply left him all unstrung. Clearly, it was time to go. With no heavy shell to slow his speed, Pagoo beat them all as they ran him out of Tidepool Town. And here's the picture. You can see him with his non-tail under a shell, and all the other hermits are after him. So again, he is shellless for I don't know how many times this has been now, but that is the end of chapter 17. Okay.